My name is Molly Anderson, and I'm the Executive Director at the Nantucket Athenaeum. On behalf of the One Book, One Island Committee, I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's program. And I would like those members of the One Book, One Island Committee who are here this afternoon, if they could just stand so we could thank them for all their hard work. And Joe's back there. I'd also like to thank the Tuppence E. Harris Foundation, as well as the Hale Family Foundation for their support. And a special shout out to Laura Qureshi and her husband, Dr. Qureshi, for helping us arrange all of our guests, our Yemeni guests, to come today. And we're very excited to have you here. I'd like to take a few minutes now to introduce you to our guests. First, Dr. Zawaya, and he is the Dean of Graduate Studies at the University of Rhode Island, and also a professor of pharmacology and neuroscience. He got his undergraduate degree at the University of Massachusetts. A lot of people here with that. And his PhD at the University of California. And he has brought a number of his friends with Yemeni ties to come today to Nantucket. And I think everybody in this group with Yemeni ties says this is the first time they've been on Nantucket. So we're giving them a real welcome. Next to Dr. Zawaya is Summer Nasser, and she is an expert and speaker on Yemeni affairs, and also the chairperson of a humanitarian organization known as Yemen Aid. She was born and raised in New York. I'm sure there's some New York people here as well. She got her bachelor's degree from Concordia in New York. And she's working on a master's at Northeastern in public administration. Also, you may recognize her name because she appeared in the Monk of Mohka. If you remember that wonderful, exciting part where he may get a car to get to a Greek freighter to leave Yemen in haste. And that was Summer working on that. Yeah. And next we have Fatima Alaki, and she's a motivational speaker for fitness and health and living with MS. And she grew up in Waterbury, Connecticut, and after college, with a degree in psychology, she worked in social services and then got training as a personal trainer, and she'll tell you more about that journey when she talks. Coming with Fatima are her sister and Amira, and with the baby, Laura, there as well. And her brother-in-law is sitting next to her, Omar, and her husband is somewhere around here, Abdul. And Amira and Abdul have just opened the coffee shop just last weekend, I think, in Middletown, Connecticut. So when you're taking that corridor down to New York City, make sure to stop in Middletown for a great cup of coffee. And of course, a little later, we'll have Mokhtar, the protagonist of the book, will be Skyping in, and he will tell us a little bit more about what's happened in his life since the book, as well as take some questions and answers from, or questions from the audience. So get those questions ready. So please join me in welcoming all these wonderful guests.
I'm gonna begin, giving you some background and information about Yemen, but I have to warn you, it's gonna be very biased. It's gonna be anecdotal. It's gonna be what my family told me. For some of it, I don't have any, actual scientific proof, but I firmly believe in it. Anybody in the audience from Ethiopia or Eritrea? Good, so we won't be fighting about history. And I'm really so pleased and honored to be joined by both Fatima and Samar and Amira and others. I founded, co-founded an organization. Actually, it was born in Boston, in my friend Abdul Wahab's home, called American Association of Yemeni Students and Professionals now. It was called Scientists before and Professionals, but now students. And somehow we are connected by that organization, which still persists today and has chapters around the country where we're trying to uplift the Yemeni community and bring them into education and professionalism and support each other. I'm always very happy and touched to see them, leaders in their community. So Yemen, this is kind of slightly different from the way I would normally present it to you, because I'm going to tell you that, the origin of many things that you may not know comes from Yemen. If I even exaggerate it, more, my family would say, humanity started in Yemen. We just haven't uncovered, those fossils, of the, but it's just across, from Ethiopia, Eritrea, where we have the highest, the oldest human, fossils and remnants. And so this a very narrow path to cross from Africa. So if humanity didn't start in Yemen, the first station they, got out of Africa was into Yemen. Because at this very, tight area called Bab el-Mandab, where all of these people trying to come and invade Yemen these days, they want to control, 70% of the world's trade goes through there. So it's really very close. I think it's probably the distance between, Nantucket and Hyannis. So very, very close. So I'm going to present to you Yemen, but I'm going to couch it in terms of origins, where things really began. And this is actually a map. It's a political map. It's a hopeful map, of Yemen divided into 6 federal regions. This is the part of the draft constitution that we were supposed to transition into a democratic state. But, the Houthis kind of turned the table on this. And, all the war that you have in Yemen is to stop this from happening. So, when I came to the U.S. decades ago, and I say, where are you coming from? I'd say, from Yemen. People say, where's that? Then I'd say, near Saudi Arabia. Oh, immediately everybody knew where that is, because oil comes from Saudi Arabia. These days, I say, where are you from? I say, from Yemen. People say, oh, I'm so sorry. And we really feel sad. So people know Yemen, but for the wrong reasons. But when you look at Yemen, has a history, that's really thousands of years. And it's not as much known, but it has a long history, especially the history of the Arabs before Islam. The civilization of the Arabs started in Yemen. And, when people used to ask me, where is Yemen? I said, do you know the Queen of Sheba? And yeah, we have that in the Bible. Then that's the land, where Yemen is. So it's the land of the Queen of Sheba. If you Google that, the Queen of Sheba, you're going to get all kinds of images, because the Ethiopians claim it's their queen. The Coptics in Egypt claim she's Coptic, and the Jewish people say, no, she's Jewish. And this is the lady that obviously made the trip, to King Solomon. And there are many different stories about that. But we have the palace, and we call her Bilqis. We have the name, we have the palace. And at that time, the kingdom of Saba, we don't call it Sheba, Saba, included, parts of East Africa, and that's why there's all this confusion about the origin of coffee and the origin of many things. But one thing you should know, that all ethnic Arabs descend from Yemen. So Yemen is the land where all the Arabs began, so it's the origin of the Arabs, because the movement was from the south to the north. So whoever call themselves Saudis or Emiratis or Qataris, they all descend from tribes that come from Yemen. And Yemen in Arabic just means the south or the right. When you're looking at the Kaaba, the south is Yemen, and the north is called Sham. Sham and Yemen. Sham is where Palestine is and Syria. So it's really a geographical location. It just means southern Arabia, Yemen. But all Arabs start from there. So that's a first, beginning that I can share with you. And so all Arabs, obviously, that's Yemeni people. My wife helped me put this together. So she, I'm sure, picked the biased pictures that are nice. But you can see, how Yemenis are very diverse, and the way we dress, and the way we are, an ancient people with a lot of history. And most of it, which is not really known. This is how we prefer to go to marriage. As you can see, our men wear guns and knives as they're going to pick up their brides. They know that marriage is a struggle and a fight, so they're coming, ready for that. And these are some, images of, traditional and folkloric Yemen, clothings. And you can see, we are a tribal people, often, misunderstood, but our society live in a terrain, where we established some of the early civilizations, and we have to protect them, and so we wear arms, and we're the number 2 country in the world that has weapons in terms of per person is Yemen. Do you know what the number 1 country is? The United States. So we're glad, we're happy to be on the list. We're second to the US. The third country, maybe you may not guess it. Anyone guess the third country? Switzerland. Very ironic, right? But we know this is just showing you some images of Yemenis dancing, going to weddings, always, dressed ready for that. So Yemen is the home of the original Arabs. So I'm starting with origins, so first people. Then number 2 is that Yemen is also the first, you may not be able to read this, but the Yemenis are the first people to build multi-story buildings, okay? And this is an image of the city of Shibam in the southern part of Yemen. The Yemenis were the first people to build multiple story buildings, so that's another first. You had a session, I think, on architecture this week, right? Yemeni architecture. But so Yemenis really, and the way the homes are designed, and in some places, this in Shibam, and I've been there, there might be up to 8 floors, where the rest of the world only caught up to this much, later. So Yemenis pride themselves in terms of architecture, and were the first, to build, multi-story buildings. We call Shibam, the Chicago of the desert, or the Manhattan of the desert, whatever you like to call that. But it's a very impressive when you go through this Wadi Hadramaut, that in the middle of it you find this, city. And this is mud, built out of mud, bricks. And, the architecture is very interesting. If you go into the design of the Yemeni home, it is very much integrated into the lifestyle. What is in the first floor and the second floor and the third floor is all designed for specific purposes. And the top floor is, for viewing and visibility for guests, is really at the top, of the house. And it's very, very interesting. And so Yemenis, have this, maybe, can you see, should I move this away from you? Do that carefully. You can see now, better? Okay. So architecture, a lot of architectural firsts for Yemen. And I have a few more images for you. This is the palace, the rock palace. This is where our last king or imam lived in. It's built, as you can see, on a rock. So it gives you even more, visibility. Actually, if you go into this, there's a swimming pool in the back. And so this is the architecture of Yemen. And it's actually very different from region to region. So this is more of the style from the north and, and Sana'a. So Yemenis are very well known, for, architecture. And this beautiful image, you can see how, Yemenis are tough people, and they like to live on the top of the mountains with a view. In some, towns, it takes a whole day just to carry the water to go up there. But they prefer to be safe at the top. They love the view. And so they construct and build in places, and they're actually the people who, I didn't put it here, who started, carving rocks, and making cities out of them and homes. And so this is, another Wadi Da'wan, I think, in Yemen. You can see here that how Yemenis, adapt and condition the environment around them. And since it's a mountain, they will build, stairs, around it, and to build a fort at the top. This is 2,000 years old. Okay, so this is a population, that really, built a civilization of its own, and were very, very creative in the way, they built. Here's an image from the Cairo Castle in Taz. So a lot of, great things of architecture. The famous, Sana'a with the gates. The whole city would be then closed. There would be, a curfew after 7 o'clock. So if you come, when the city gate is closed, you have to sleep and stay outside and you can't come in. So this is also another architecture. So I've covered for you origins in terms of the history and ancestry of all the Arabs. And I've covered for you, architecture, which is Yemenis are really pioneers in architecture. And they built the first multi-story, buildings. And this is maybe from outside, but inside, Yemeni homes are really designed in such a way, that really is a functional way. We like to make our living rooms, for example, very close to each other. So when you have guests, you're able to sit and communicate, closely. There's strategically, placed, windows. There's big windows and there's small windows for air. And we love, to do this glass arches and decorations. But Arabic decor. Remember the civilization of the Arabs before Islam began in Yemen. And now a lot of people use different names. They may call this, Moroccan. They may call it, Gulf, or Saudi or something like that. But really all of these things that others are emulating and changing with time, their origin is in Yemen. Another first, for Yemen is the first dam in the world to store water was built in Yemen. My kids always say, Dad, everything is Yemen. Soon you're going to tell us spaghetti was discovered in Yemen. But this is really true. This is the dam, in the middle of the desert that the Yemenis, really worked with conserving water in the environment they were there. And they built the dam, and the whole civilization of the Queen of Sheba is next to this dam. And the conservation of the water really was the livelihood for them. And when the dam broke, then the civilization of Sheba fell. And many of the tribes that were a product when they lost the dam started moving north. And that's where they moved to the other parts, of Arabia. But the first dam was, built in Yemen. And you can see that Yemenis are not just about dam. They really cherished the little water they were getting, from the monsoon rains. And so you'll see all around Yemen, the big example, this is the tanks in Aden. This whole thing was actually buried under hundreds of feet of sand. Nobody even knew it existed. When the British occupied Aden, in late 1800s, they just like, discovering the pyramids and what's around it. And they dug around, they found this very intricate cisterns, for water storage and tanks in Aden that stored, rainwater because, all they had in front of them was seawater that was salt and was built with volcanic, bricks that last for a long, long time. So Yemenis really, saved every single drop of water. They terraced their mountains, against erosion. And so the first, tanks, you may say, Romans, but really the Romans came to Yemen, they call it Arabia Felix or Happy Arabia because they could find it to be green. And when you meet Yemenis, they always make you happy. So that's the only country in the world that has that name. But concentration, you can see, from the mountains, how they have pools and tanks and the dams. So, Yemen is the first dam and maybe some of the first technology agriculture of conserving, water for agriculture. Now, about the best things. And here's where my bias comes. But really, the best grapes in the world are from Yemen. The reason I know that, I've tasted grapes from Yemen, and I've traveled to so many countries around the world. I've never found grapes that are better than those in Yemen. And then, an early Muslim geographer, Ibn Rusta, went through Yemen at that time, could count up to 70 different varieties of grapes. This is an explorer, hundreds of years ago. But Yemen, for some reason, it has, the right climate and the technology. You can see from all the water conservation and agriculture and the civilization built about that. They optimize the way, the grapes there are just amazing. The colors you find, even the rare types of grapes that look like, fingers, all the different colors. So the best grapes in the world come from Yemen. See, you didn't expect that. Here's another best. The best honey in the world comes from Yemen. Okay? And believe me, it's very expensive, right? You can buy it on eBay, but you be ready to pay $100 for a jar like this. But, the Arabs know that when they want honey, the best honey is coming, really from Yemen. And there's many different kinds, of honey, doani, sidr, many different types. But a whole, industry is built around honey, and Yemenis really open stores. If you travel around the Gulf in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, in many different places, the honey stores are Yemenis. They know where to get the best honey, and it really tastes different, and it's really, really good, okay? So grapes, honey. I know you came here about coffee, but I wanted to let you know there's other things that are really best that you may not know, and read that. You need to meet a Yemeni to know that. Okay, before there was a Paris, okay, the frankincense and myrrh. The frankincense and myrrh, and incense and burning incense, that was started from Yemen, really. And if you see, obviously, in the Bible, other places, they describe the three kings that came from the south, right? And, there's different images of them, how they look if you Google it. But technically, it was from the south. And Yemen, actually, the Yemenis had this, industry and this knowledge of making frankincense and myrrh, and they monopolized that. All the temples in Egypt, all the temples in Rome, the temples in other parts of the world, they always needed, incense to inspire people and to amaze people. And they had the secret, the chemistry of how to make incense. Okay, so the beginnings of frankincense and myrrh is really coming from Yemen. And there's still people, I have members of my family, they make all kind of different, incense, and that you don't find it in the market. So, how many of you knew that the three kings are coming from Yemen? You did, right? Read the Bible, read the stories. They say came from the south. But historians will tell you that the frankincense was very high demand all over the world. And the kingdoms from the southern part of Arabia, they had a monopoly of this. And they were the economy. Really their economy in the beginning was based on really, transporting across land, all the frankincense and myrrh all the way to Rome and all the kingdoms and all the temples. So frankincense and myrrh. Some of these, the resins that come from this very special island in Yemen, Socotra Island, which has also some of the rarest types of trees. The blood dragon tree and all of these phenomenal, beautiful. This is like an island, it's like the archipelago in South America. It's a protected, heritage. And the plants and animals have so many rare species of plants, and some of the sap and some of these from these plants are used also in that kind of industry. Cosmetics. All right. They didn't start in Paris. In Paris, they didn't, they had homes, they didn't have bathrooms in them for a couple hundred years ago. They would, the Palace of Versailles, as impressive as it is, it didn't have a bathroom. But if you go into the architecture of the Yemeni homes from thousands of years, special bathrooms were built, with a well, and it's amazing when you go inside those homes. And so in Paris, the streets were getting so smelly because of how people were going outside to do it. That they started, discovering perfumes and, you may not know this, but this is a historical fact, in order to be able to get rid of all of that. But, I would claim that the chemistry of making perfumes, really, the chemistry and the formulas, and we still have an industry, a cottage industry that does this, originated from Yemen. Kuhul, for eye, makeup, but there's a lot of Yemeni products making, frankincense, incense, perfumes, all of these things you see in mosques and in different places. All of that, the history of it actually comes from Yemen, and so maybe those who know something about fashion, like Amira, can correct me if I'm wrong. But I know you came for something different. So I told you I was going to have a biased presentation, right? The best coffee, though, you taste it. Everybody knows the best coffee in the world comes from Yemen, okay? And somehow the climate, and the history and the traditions of the people that grow coffee over time have optimized that, okay? Obviously, there's coffee in Ethiopia, and a lot of coffee comes from there, and in Kenya, and different places. And we always, with our African brothers, we say, no, coffee started, here. They say, no, we have coffee. You don't have coffee. They were all part of a kingdom. But, coffee was, although it grows in all these different places, was introduced to the West through Yemen. I don't know if you knew that or in your readings. Because Yemen was occupied by the Ottoman Turks, okay? And they met coffee in Yemen. So when you read about Turkish coffee, trust me, coffee does not grow in Turkey. Because Turkey is not even in the tropics. You need to be in a specific, belt. But the Turks took the coffee from Yemen and introduced it to Europe. All the coffee that used to go to the world, 1800s to Europe, 1700s, was coming from the port of Mohka. Today, Mohka has a flavor, right? There is a real place called Mohka in Yemen because all the coffee, used to go from there all the way to Europe. So the Turks introduced it to Europe, and then the coffee was taken, by different Europeans and then brought to Sumatra and Java in Indonesia, was grown there. And then the Portuguese took it from there to Brazil. So really Yemen is part of the, maybe introducing the world and marketing coffee, to the world. So I would argue that the best coffee, is really coming from Yemen. I know my friend Abdul Wahab would be with me, so I had to have a picture of his home, province of Ib, where there's terraces and these beautiful, mountains, but you need a unique climate, you need a tropical climate, you need an elevation, you need just the right amount of, to really make the best coffee. You can see this is Haraz, where there is, they grow coffee in Haraz. And you can see that because Yemenis believe in living on the, apex and the top of the highest mountains, the clouds are actually under you. And this is really the best kind of climate you want to have for, coffee, growing. So I'm almost coming to the end of my talk. And really what brought us here was the Monk of Mohka, right? And coffee. But I hope that I tried to give you an idea. There is more to Yemen than coffee. And those people who produce, the coffee that also produce a lot of other wonderful things. We will be showing you a video about, it's an old song, by a Yemeni poet called Mutahhar al-Iryani. It's about love and coffee, okay? And actually Mukhtar translated, because it was recently redone, by, young people with high tech, redone this old song. And these are some excerpts from the translation of Mukhtar. O overseer of coffee trees, glad tidings for the coffee season has approached. Why are the birds drunk between the fruits of our gardens? Did they taste the first cup of free nectar? And proceeded to sing to the world of the most beautiful songs. Oh coffee, oh pearls on the trees. Whoever grows you will never become poor or tired with tribulations. I will meet you, love of my heart, at a vast valley. We will harvest and dream during those moments together and be merry. And the birds will cheer and sing to us when they come. And from our work comrades, my love, we hear congratulations. Congratulations to who was patient for this moment. Good fortune was read in the stars, and all their wishes are granted. And I think we can, if we're ready to start the video.
شباب الجو الأروع تهيا هيا نغني سوا للحب للحب واغلى الأماني يا حارس البني بشرى موسم البني داني ما للعصافير سكرى بين خضر الجنان هل ذقت الكاس الأول من رحيق المجاني واسترسلت تطربا أكوان بأحلى الأغاني شيروا بالخبر بشاير أول ثمر ظاهر بلون الخفر على خدود الغواني ظن اليمن يا درر يا كنز فوق الشجر من يزرعك مفتقر ولا بتولي بالهواني
نلتقي وحبيب القلب لا ولي
Images you were seeing, this man wanted to ask, the hands of this woman for marriage and went to her father. And his father said, it's coffee harvest season. We really don't have time for that. You gotta wait until all the coffee harvest is done. And so, he was patiently waiting and waiting. And so this love in the age of coffee, we got better, things. You have to wait. And you can see the images of the father looking at the farmer, how impatient, but loving his coffee, but really waiting to get married. And his bride is waiting for the coffee to be done. So this is the story of love, in the age of the coffee harvest. It's an old song that was redone by young people, really nice, right? And I think with that, I think I'm done. Are we ready for Mukhtar? Mukhtar, salam alaikum, how are you?
Alaikum salam.
Wonderful. You are the reason we're here today, and we really have a group of fantastic people. We just, I did a presentation on Yemen, and then I put the new song, which you translated some of it, about al-hub fi zaman al-bun, or love in the age of coffee. Very nice. And everybody is anxious, I think, to ask you a few questions. We really wanted you to be here in person, but I know you're very busy. But thank you for coming, and I want, Molly, I don't know how you want to proceed with this, and yeah.
Hi, welcome. We've got a room full of people. Many of them have read the Monk of Mohka. And I think one of the questions that we've all had is to know what's happened in your world and your coffee business since the book was published. So if you could start there, I think that would be wonderful.
Well, absolutely. First off, I wanted to thank Dr. Nasser Zawiya for, he might be too humble to say this, but growing up as a Yemeni American here, he was a source of inspiration for me personally, and for a lot of my friends who wanted to pursue something different than what was kind of the norm for our community. As recent immigrants, education wasn't something that our families pushed on us, but Nasser Zawiya, he started an organization and co-founded it called the American Association of Yemeni Students and Professionals. And it was really focused on promoting education throughout Yemeni Americans here, and I'm in many ways a product of him, and so I just wanted to start off by thanking you personally for the work you've done and that you're doing for our community here.
Thank you, Mukhtar. I'm very proud of you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Secondly, I do apologize. I really did want to come to Nantucket. First off, I did not know how difficult it was to get there.
Neither did we.
I do have some experience with boats, but that was one. And I'm actually speaking in a couple of hours at this. It's called Zaytuna College. It's the first accredited Muslim liberal arts college in America, and the topic is on food, on faith-based food entrepreneurship. And so, it unfortunately was on the same day as your event tonight. Otherwise, I would have tried to make it out. But to answer your question, I mean, it's been about 13 months since the book has been released, and most Americans don't know much about Yemen other than what they see on Fox News, or that one episode of Friends when Chandler Bing had to escape Janice and wanted to go to Yemen. But and so my whole life I never thought I'd be in a position to be able to present Yemen in such a mainstream way. And I was very fortunate to have someone like Dave Eggers, an incredible individual who uses his platform to really tell the stories of people whose stories haven't been told or heard. And so it's all still very surreal, to be honest. But in terms of our work, since I left Yemen the first time, I went back, by the way, about 4 months after my first escape. And it's very sad every time I go to Yemen. I go throughout the year. it's sad to see, people who are not there anymore. There isn't a family who hasn't lost somebody, and it's a very real sadness to see people leave, disappear, and also just to see the country just spiral downwards, becoming the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. It's really hard, and so for me, the work I do, I feel it's very important to try to bring some alleviation of poverty in Yemen. Although sometimes I do feel like my work is just a drop in the sea of despair and difficulties, but I try to be hopeful and to continue the work I do. And so in terms of work in Yemen, it's very hard to get things imported into the country, but there isn't much being exported out. And so because of that, it's a little easier for us to get shipments out of Yemen, particularly because the port of Aden, it goes through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is one of the most highly trafficked ocean areas in the world. All the ocean freights that come through the Suez Canal go through that. So Yemen plays a very strategic location in the world of commerce. And so we've been able to scale our production to 3 different areas in Yemen, particularly mostly in the north, which is where most of the battles are still taking place. I mean, I can go into a lot of, small and minute details, but in short, it's been nice and amazing to see our coffee being showcased around the world. There's roasters in Tokyo and Paris and Brooklyn, and to be able to use coffee as a way to bring economic relief to people like in Yemen. I believe in social entrepreneurship, and I believe that coffee through direct trade is an incredible way to alleviate poverty. And this isn't something that I invented or thought of. I was really inspired by Rwanda and how coffee was used post-genocide to really rebuild the country's economy. So I hope that's not too broad, but that's the best I can answer right now. And if you guys want me to go to any small details, I can do that too.
Book discussion earlier in the week. There were 35, 40 of us sitting around, and it was a wonderful, very animated discussion. One of the things we started with was asking people in the room how they would define the American dream. And it was interesting. It was a broad definition. And then we sort of talked about the traits that we felt people might have that would help them be successful in following the American dream. There was also a gentleman there from Australia who pointed out that many countries have dreams, not just America, and point taken. But I wondered, as you think back on the characteristics and traits and experiences that you had, what are some of them that you think helped you become successful?
When I was younger, like a lot of young people, they get to a point where we feel kind of stuck. We don't know what our next move is supposed to be. And there were these questions that I would always find myself asking myself over and over again. And they were very terrifying questions. That is, what is my purpose here? What am I supposed to do with my life? Where is my path? And those are things that really were difficult for me because I didn't have much growing up. My father's a bus driver, and we lived 9 of us in a 1-bedroom apartment, a very difficult neighborhood for all the Tenderloin in San Francisco. When comedian Dave Chappelle described my old neighborhood, he said, "Ain't nothing tender about that place." It's a very difficult reality, lots of drugs and violence. And even before that, I lived for the first 9 years in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And so as a young kid, I didn't have much hope, I would say. I felt that I was limited in my choices in life because of my circumstance. And I think that's one of the saddest things that can happen to young kids when they're not allowed the ability to dream or to see themselves outside of their circumstances. And here comes this idea of the American dream. Just a show of hands, raise your hand if you or your parents or grandparents immigrated to the US. Okay, great. And raise your hand if you heard the story of one of them saying that they showed up to this country with $20 in their pockets. And so my parents had a similar story where they came here with not much. And so this country is very unique in a sense that you have the ability to have upward mobility and to find a path that makes you successful. But as a millennial growing up, the idea of the American dream seems very far away. We hear, things like student debt crisis and oversaturated marketplaces and all these things. And so it's really hard. I think Dave, one of my favorite quotes that he said was, the American dream is always alive, but always under threat. Then you have to deal with people who try to divide us and try to, create others. And as an immigrant or a person who comes from an immigrant background, you find yourself in this place where you don't know where you belong. Am I not Yemeni enough to be Yemeni? Am I not American enough to be American? And it took me a long time to realize that you can actually be both and become them both beautifully. And that's what makes this country very unique. A melting pot of different peoples and ideas, and together we become really stronger and more unique. And so what are some of the characteristics that make someone more likely to be successful? That's a very good question. I think one of them is your hunger and this idea of grit. I read a lot of books on this subject, and I try to study different people who are successful. By the way, when I use the word success, I don't mean it in a material sense. The way I look at success is finding a calling or something that brings you happiness, and in some way alleviates or brings happiness to others. And so that's how I define success. And in my studies and looking at different people who are successful in the different fields, one thing I always notice is this characteristic of grit. That when times get hard, that you're able to find opportunities and not give up. There's an old Arab proverb that said, if you're brave in the last moment of the battle, you'll win the war. And oftentimes we find ourselves in places where we're up against the wall and success seems so far away. And each successful person goes through their problem, their issue, and they're able to somehow find a turning point and to become successful. Because without grit, it's grit and belief in something, whether it's a higher power like God or something else that keeps you going. I think when we just use logic, we're very limited. I know that there's a quote that says, logic will get you from point A to point B, but imagination or belief can take you anywhere. And so for me, to be honest with you guys, there isn't a clear trajectory, a logical trajectory to get me from where I was in Yemen, trying to stay alive, to being in front of you today, talking to you in Skype. And so I think that having grit and having a belief in something will help you get through those obstacles and those difficulties. And then hopefully, you'll have your American dream or your Australian or, Eritrean, whatever country you're from. You'll have your type of success.
Yes, Laura?
Hello. My name is Laura. I work at the Athenaeum under Molly. I really enjoyed your book, and my question, aside from your story, really kind of seems more like a movie. It was really fun to read. My question is more on how the plants survive. Like, you have honey. Like, do the plants need honeybees? How is the state of the farming in Yemen right now?
Thank you, Laura. It's a great question. One of the things that makes Yemen very unique is the different types of genetic diversity in Yemen. So in the world of coffee, we have about 66 to 70 countries that grow coffee between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. And in the coffee community, in the coffee producing countries, there's about 200 commercial varietals. Most coffee producing countries have 2 cultivars and then submutations from these. And to make it easier to understand, a cultivar or a varietal is just like in apples. We have like Granny Smith, and we have Fuji apples and Washington Red and Pink Lady. And so in coffee, we have these different names or different types of cultivars and varieties. Names like Typica, Bourbon, Gesha, Hatwa'i. And in Yemen, we have the highest amount of genetic diversity in coffee. The World Coffee Research Program issued a report last year that outside of Yemen and Ethiopia, there is less than 1.2% of genetic diversity in coffee. By the way, there's this big debate between the origins of coffee between Yemen and Ethiopia. And depending on which side of the Red Sea you live, you have a different answer. I lean more towards Ethiopia as the origin of the plant, where it grew wildly, but they didn't drink coffee. Their early consumption was they would take the cherries and they would use they would kind of roll it with animal fat and eat it like a bar, some kind of early keto diet. And but the first people to actually cultivate coffee intentionally and to harvest it and to roast it and make this wonderful drink that will change your life were Yemenis, were these Sufi monks who lived in the port of Mocha. Yemen was called Arabia Felix, Happy Arabia, by the Romans because of how much rain it received and how green it was, and it still is. And so you see it has a lot of ancient dynasties and histories, the Himyarite Empire, the Sabine Empire, the Levant Empire, and many more. Because of the rich history and cultivation that Yemen had, there was the famous Ma'rib Dam, one of the highest technological achievements in early human civilizations. And because of that dam, they were able to irrigate large amounts of areas throughout Yemen. And so these cultivars in Yemen, they're very, very unique. They're able to withstand drought. And because the trees are very stressed, it's very similar to wine. When grapes are stressed, they produce sweeter wines. So our trees are stressed. Because of that, they have to produce more acids, and there's a more concentration of fats, and the flavors taste more dynamic. Actually, one of the biggest effects in coffee today in the world outside of Yemen is because of climate change and global warming, certain types of diseases have become prevalent. One in particular is called Roya, or leaf rust, which in 2013 really devastated many countries in Central America. Countries like El Salvador lost 75% of their production, and Guatemala lost 50%, where the Guatemalan government had to issue a national state of emergency. And so in Yemen, we have these amazing cultivars that actually do well under stress and pressure. And so I've been working with the Coffee Quality Institute and some folks in the Yemeni Ministry of Agriculture, one in particular named Dr. Abdul Hafiz Garhash, who's the head of plant production, and Samir Bakmi, the head of coffee in the Ministry of Agriculture, on looking for different kinds of varietals to help other countries that need these types of diversity in genetics. And so in terms of the plants, Yemen is very wealthy in their types of their unique plants and the flavors that they produce. The issue, however, in Yemen is, unfortunately, many of the bombings have targeted the economic infrastructure of Yemen, roads, bridges, and unfortunately, in many cases, in some cases actually, the farming infrastructure. And so that's been a huge issue for us right now. We work with these farms in these remote areas, and they're small lot farmers. Many of them have less than 100 trees. We have collection centers where we pick coffee and we help educate them on better practices and pay them a higher price for that, and give microloans, which have been our highest impact. But it's when we take them out from the villages and into our centralized center in the capital, Sana'a, is where there's a huge risk where you can, essentially have an airstrike destroy your center, which has happened to other coffee companies in Yemen. And so for us, it really isn't until the coffee gets onto the water and is shipped out that we can kind of breathe a little. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh, the question is how the sorters are doing, those wonderful group of women that you brought together.
Well, since we've been able to grow from, I think it was 9 or 10 to now we're 30, and they are some of the most resilient, bravest people I've ever met and known. I would not be able to do my work without their involvement. Early on, when I wanted to hire an all-woman staff, people thought, well, women, they can't do certain things. Coffee bags are very heavy; they're 60 kilos. And so we just made it 30 kilos. And so they're really incredible. During the war, many of them, their husbands lost their jobs, and so they were the main breadwinners. They were so brave. They would show up to work in the daytime and then go back before the airstrikes at night. And so they've been doing really well. And one of the things I want to do is I'm trying to showcase many more of their stories. They're a little shy in some instances, but I think that many people have asked me about them and how they're doing and these kind of questions. And so some of them we'll have Skype calls and have them talk to them directly, especially one of them I met who speaks a little bit English, not much. But they're incredible. They're the last. I always tell them they're the last people to inspect the coffee, and after that, it leaves their hands. It goes around the world to these roasters, and so it's been great trying to expand my work in Yemen and to hire more women. I think that it's unfortunate that we can't grow as fast as we want because of the war, but. Regardless of that, yeah, there was a time early on when we didn't have any coffee being shipped out, and I knew if I didn't continue paying them, they would have to, it would be very difficult for them to survive or figure out what to do. And so I made the decision to just keep paying them throughout that time period, and I'm very glad I did because, I think that companies shouldn't just look at profit margins and what makes sense economically. There's the human side of things, and that's very important. And I tell you right now that people who work for me, there are times that we went through a lot of difficulties and struggles, and if it wasn't in their actual belief that this project is something that they are proud of doing and being a part of it, I couldn't have continued. And that's really what goes down to having a team of people who believe in what you want to do and your vision, because if people are just incentivized monetarily through money, then when things get difficult, it's not worth it for them. But if they have a higher sense, a higher value, that this is something that they really believe in, they will stick by you. And then these women definitely have.
So how many more transports of coffee have come since your first one?
We're on our 5th one now. We just got our 5th one that landed 2 months ago. And this coffee now is going... A lot of our coffee goes to Asia, to Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and China. There's this huge love for high-end quality things. In China, they will buy the most expensive wines or a pound of a special tea for $20,000. And so it's been interesting. I've never traveled to Asia before, and so to get to go to these countries and experience and tell the story of Yemen, it's been wonderful. And in the U.S., we're lucky to work with a few roasters here. Intelligentsia in Chicago, George Howell in Boston, Blue Bottle, a few others like that throughout the country. We also sell online directly to consumers. If you go on our website, Port of Mohka, www.portofmocha.com, so the MOKHA, we have a really wonderful gift box and also a subscription service that people love to buy. And I think one of the things that makes our company unique is that when you work with roasters, typically they buy coffee from an importer or maybe from an exporter. And so we try to be connected throughout the value chain. So we're a very farmer-centric company, and we try to tell the stories of the farmers, but also get rid of the middle people. We try to shorten the distance between producers and consumers. That way the value can return to farmers and also to the customers.
How many farmers are you working with now, and is it representative of a wide range of ages?
So we are working in 3 areas, in Haraz, in Hayma al-Kharijiyah, and in Idia, centrally part of Yemen. And so we have between 13,500 and 18,000 farmer families that we work with. And most of our farmers, 75% of farmers in Yemen are women. Men usually work in the cities or in the diaspora abroad. And so one of our requirements for we organize cooperatives. We sort of have a cascade model of organizing. So we organize cooperatives in these villages, and in turn, we train them, and they train their individual families. And so most of them are women. A huge part of them now are younger millennials who used to be in the cities and have escaped the war to their villages, which they're much more safer in villages because it's far from like big military bases. And so those young kids that we work with, they're between 17 and 32 years old. They're the most unique ones because they can communicate with me through WhatsApp and Facebook. And so it's very easy to work with them. The older generation is very hard to try to convince them to change their ways. And I do my best to do that. And as a Yemeni speaking Arabic, it helps being able to, put my Yemeni hat on, or in my case, turban, and work with them. But really my success has been with the younger generation who are we can say more adapt, more easily influenced, or can try to do different things.
What was your reaction when you heard that someone was going to write a book about you?
So funny. So Dave, I've known Dave since I was, I think, 21 or 22. I didn't know he was a famous author. I met him through a friend of mine named Mujahid Ali, he was a playwright and a journalist, and they were working on a TV script for a TV show for HBO. And the main character was from Yemen. So another friend of mine connected them to me because they wanted to make sure it was an accurate portrayal of the Yemeni community. The show didn't go anywhere, and the thing with Dave is if you ever meet, which I hope you do meet him, he's a wonderful man, he has a flip phone, like a clamshell phone, and he has no Wi-Fi in his house. So you see him, and he has like his baseball hat with like a pin holding it together, and you'll never assume like much of it. You think he's a great guy, and I had read 2 of his books, A Heartbreaking Work of Psycho and Genius and What is the What? And I just thought he was a really good writer, a local guy from the Bay Area. And in San Francisco, it's a very small community, and he's if you're in the activist communities, and I used to do a lot of work with the mayor's office and civil rights issues. But we'd meet up, and I didn't think much of him. I actually, to show you how bad it was, I remember seeing one of his books, I think it was The Circle. I saw it in the airport, and I texted him, "Hey man, Dave, congratulations. I just saw one of your books in the airport." I really didn't know. And so when I went to Yemen, he had heard about the Americans that were stuck there and the U.S. government's abandonment of us. So he reached out to me, and we met up. The prologue, the intro of the book, that's where I met up with him in front of Blue Bottle Coffee. About a week, he tried to convince me about this book idea. I was going through a lot of issues. I had a lot of trauma I hadn't processed yet. I didn't see the value. I didn't know what he would write about. And the interesting thing about the book experience, which took, by the way, 3 years to write this book. In the process, he went to Ethiopia, to Yemen, Djibouti with me. He took a Q course. He really got involved in my life very intimately. As I read the book, I learned a lot about myself. It sounds funny, but oh, when I was a kid, this incident happened to me, and because of that, I see the world this way. It was really an interesting experience to see that happen, but also to see his writing process and how in depth it is, and the level of excellence and the level of what he did. It was just incredible to have that happen, and so. I kind of just, for a while, it was very awkward because I kind of felt it was like that movie Stranger Than Fiction. He's kind of up there narrated in my life. And it wasn't, I started to read a few of the chapters, and I realized, wow, this is really, he's able to put you in a place and time and make you feel certain things and smells, and but I really didn't understand it until my first event where people read the book. It was an event in SF, and I think there was 1,600 people that came to this giant book event. And during this book signing, the people who read the book and told me how how it changed the way they look at coffee, or immigrants, or Muslims, or Yemenis. I never thought I would in my life be in a place where I could do that kind of impact. And so, in many ways, I'm still trying to uncover this and figure it out. But I hope that the book, it's my story, but really it's I hope different people can find themselves in those pages.
The Australian who was referred to earlier. So 2 quick questions. What's your dream for your company, and then what's your dream for Yemeni?
For my company, was that the first part?
Company.
Your company and then for Yemen.
Yes. So my goal is to continue using coffee as a way to socially impact Yemen, and not just that, but to also connect people to Yemen to do coffee. People don't really know much about it, but they love coffee. So I want to continue doing that. We're working with a few other origins, Ethiopia, Indonesia, in the near future. And so my idea is to use my platform to help other farmers around the world, and to connect people directly to farmers and have an incredible platform where it's traceable, it's equitable, and people are being paired, not just what's fair, but what's enough for them to live a dignified life. And so that takes up most of my life. I don't do many events. I do maybe once a month if I can at most, because I have a company to run and trying to manage that and to scale that and make the right decisions. I feel that I now have a responsibility to create this platform for other farmers, not just in Yemen, to grow that. And then your second question for Yemen, I believe that my work will outlast these bombs. I know that they will, and I hope that I can inspire a generation of other Yemenis to do something similar. I mentor and help a few other Yemenis working in coffee now. There's a woman named Halam Saeed who's doing a frankincense company with women in ties. Another friend of mine who's doing honey out of the Doan Valley in Hadramaut. And so there are many other indigenous products that Yemen produces that are really just wonderful treasures. And they might be a different product than coffee, but they're very similar building blocks. So my goal is to try to get more people to do these kind of businesses that are socially driven, not just based on ROIs. I actually do also consult for free a few people who do work. There's a woman in Afghanistan working with Afghani pomegranates, and someone in Chiapas, Mexico, working with cacao farmers. And so I think that people like me, Dave calls us bridgers, people who come from producing countries but live and consume in Western countries. We can play a very unique role as a bridge between these two places because we're uniquely qualified. We speak both languages, we have both identities. And so I think that the way things are being produced, distributed, and consumed currently is not sustainable. There needs to be new systems made. And the only way that's going to happen is with new ways of thinking. And I think young people, that's our time to get up and try to fix this world in any way we can.
Thank you so much. And
if it's okay, I want to end with a poem.
Please do. Please do.
So there was a version of the book that was more about, it had more history in it, the history of coffee. And I think it was 100 more pages. I love that version, but I think Dave was like, I think people might fall asleep. Which is ironic because it's a book about coffee. But for me, I fell in love with the potential of coffee for us as humans. When coffee left the port of Mocha in the 1500s and entered Europe and cities like Vienna and London and Paris, people for the first time had a beverage that wasn't alcohol, because alcohol really numbed your senses. It was something that heightened your senses, and people had this incredible intellectual spark, where at these coffee houses, many social movements happened. Philosophers gathered, politicians gathered, and it was a place of incredible learning. And one of the first things I read in Arabic early on was a poem. As a disclaimer, you should all know by now, I am not the Monk of Mohka. That title belongs to a man named Sheikh Ali ibn Umar al-Shadili, who lived in the port of Mocha, and he wrote a book. This part didn't make it into the book, but I want to share it with you guys tonight. He wrote a book called, in Arabic, Inas al-Safwa bi Anfas al-Qahwa, which translates as the people of self-purification through the breaths of coffee. And he says in Arabic, I'll do my best to translate. يقول رحمه الله قهوة البني يا أهل الغرام, or coffee or people of love. ساعدتني على طرد المنام. You helped me repel away my sleep. وعانتني بعون الله على طاعة الله والناس نيامي. And you helped me with God's help to stay awake and worship you while people fell asleep. لا تلوموني على شربي لها إنها شراب السادة الكرام. Don't blame me for my intense love for coffee. It is the drink of the generous, righteous people. And that it is. Thank you.
Chance to come to Nantucket. Thank you, Mukhtar.
Thank you again so much, and thank you so much for sharing my story. It really means a lot to me for that you chose my book as your Islands book this month, and it means a lot that you're sharing the story, not just of mine, but of Yemenis that are struggling now. And if I can leave you with one thing, whatever you can donate generously, please do. Yemen is going through a very difficult time. Please write to your representatives, state and Congress. We pay taxes; they represent our interests, and we need to push legislation forward to end this horrible war. And so for that, that would really mean a lot to me. And, thank you again so much.
Thank you, Mukhtar. We also have here Samar and Fatima from Yemen Aid that are going to be speaking. And we have other, Yemeni couple here who have started their new coffee place in Middletown, Connecticut, called Kawa. Hope you heard that.
Well, thank you. I mean, Mukhtar is an amazing person. We support him dearly, truly. And before anything, I wanted to thank everyone here in this beautiful island. Honestly, he's right. It is very difficult to come here. Laura, I had an event, speaking engagement in Michigan yesterday, and so she booked me this ticket, and I went to the airport, and at Cape Air, and they're like, okay, what's your weight? And I'm like, excuse me, like, what do you, where are we going here? And she's like, okay, we need to weight your purse. I'm like, okay, where am I going? Because I would like to know. She's like, sweetie, you're going on a 9-passenger, and I said, holy smokes. I said, shut up, are you serious? And so she was like, yeah, it was fascinating, and it was a beautiful experience, and to be here, I sent a photo to my husband. I was like, pray for me. But anyways, Dr. Zawiya is also one of my inspirations. He also started, the AAYSP alongside Dr. Shakir al-Ashwal and other amazing, influentials in our community. And so, to be here with him is amazing, and to be with my colleague Fatma as well is superb. Now, Dr. Zawiya spoke eloquently about the biases of our views in Yemen. And yeah, we were the first of everything at this point. But unfortunately, I always get the topic to discuss the sad part about Yemen. And I try to dignify that a little bit. I don't tend to, showcase a lot of the horrendous photos and things of that nature. But Mukhtar, while we were together in Yemen, we were stuck in the war. And I went and I got married in the war. It was 5 days before my marriage, and it just broke out, and I canceled it. And I said, peace out, I'm going to go back to New York. But, Mukhtar was trying to leave. We were stuck. And I said, come down and he was all the way from Sana'a. He was up north. And I said, come down, drive down to Aden, and there's a Greek ship. I don't know what in the world I did that for, but I was like, just come on, let's do it together. I'm very adventurous. So I did. He was like that. He just hopped on a regular truck, like a pickup, and he drove all the way down, and there was some slogans, like political slogans, and it got him in trouble. You read, obviously. I was in my little car, and he was in a very difficult situation, life, death. I thought I was responsible for his well-being, and I had to, my mom was involved. She had a really heavy Brooklyn accent. She was like, no. Like she used to, there was a gentleman from the resistance, and he was heavily weaponized. And my mom's like, no, this is this is fiance. They're fiancés. They're not here, even though I was already engaged. But we were trying to save the situation. And so from that experience, I came back to New York, and you know, I thought about what I can do to give back. Given our privileges here and our resources, it's always good to think out of the box. And so, you know, I'm chairperson of Yemen Aid, and it's actually from, I believe, the youngest organization to have an INGO status in Yemen, which was an amazing milestone for us, especially as youth, to showcase what we can or are capable of. But Yemen's civilization's pretty much the oldest at this point. It's beautiful, and people usually use the pretense, oh, Yemen was a great country, Yemen had. And I always say Yemen is still the greatest country, and I try to emphasize that because we're just stuck in a conflict that is not in our hands, but we still dream the dream. Yemen is going through the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Over 2/3 of the country, around 22 million people, are in need of humanitarian assistance. And Yemen is a very tribal society. So dignity is so preserved in Yemen. I mean, people fight to preserve their dignity and their respect. And so this war has damaged that completely and shattered that completely. Even for myself here with you, it really pains me, as much as I love being here. But it pains me because I am looking to asking people to help my country. And it's not the best feeling in the world, but I know it's the only responsibility that I can actually do here in the United States. Diseases like cholera, which is, you know, centuries old, that can be solved really easily with just pure water and, you know, decent sanitation, has took the lives of thousands in Yemen. And with that being said, it's just horror after horror, horror after horror. And this conflict originally started as a civil war, and it's an internal crisis, and then we had external interventions. But at the end of the day, there are victims on the ground. There are youth. The population, by the way, 70% youth, around that, which basically means that a whole generation has only seen conflicts. So what we're trying to do with Yemen Aid is basically bring in different types of people to showcase their expertise in giving back to their country. Yemeni Americans here from Google, from top 500 Fortune companies, from the best banks in Manhattan, in New York. We bring those views and mix up a solution, or try to merge a solution to how to bring back you know, some sense of, or elevating the unfortunate situation on ground. So one misconception that I would like to break here is that Yemen is going through a humanitarian crisis partially because of the failure of the international community. And how is basically the framework of humanitarian assistance has been focused on emergency appeals, which tends to, over time, yes, it's good in the beginning, but over time, it then makes the people depend on humanitarian assistance. And building that framework creates a higher famine. You know, I was actually in Geneva last week, and you know, they raised $2.6 billion. And we were at a circle, and I had a privilege of being with very high-level people about the humanitarian. We had USAID was in the corner over there. Then we had like a humanitarian coordinator, very well known. And USAID, he was sleeping actually. He was, you know, when we started talking a little bit political, then he kind of like woke up, and I'm like, very typical, you know. But, you know, I brought this up. I said, this is an economically driven humanitarian crisis. The reason why people are starving is because, not that because there's no resources on the ground, or food on the ground, so people can't afford to pay it anymore. People cannot afford to you know, fill their tables anymore. So what we're trying to do at Yemen Aid is, yes, we do the traditional foods, yes, we, you know, the aids, I'm sorry, but we're also sustaining basic services. So for example, you know, 911, you know, we call the ambulance, it's, you know, great service. So we took that concept and built it in Yemen. And we created jobs at this ambulance service, and we've seen, just every month I see the list of people and patients that we take over and help and assist. People from births, from, you know, kidney dialysis failure, just such a vast amount of different situations. So we took that concept And now we're working to hopefully build that in a larger scale. The second is health awareness. I mean, health crisis in Yemen is horrendous as it was already, and now it's 10 times worse after the war. So we've created the first breast cancer clinic in a certain province of Lahej in Yemen. And now we're working with universities and partners on the ground to educate women on why it's important. It's not a taboo. It shouldn't be a shame that you're taking care of yourself. So these are the concepts that we built. Now, today we announced actually a grant for local NGOs, which was in honor of a victim. Her name is Riham Bedr, and she was a humanitarian aid worker, also a lawyer, and she got killed in the line of duty. And so when Mukhtar said women are really on top of it, they really are. They have sacrificed their lives. They're on the front lines. They are in crossfires at times where they've also become the breadwinners of their families. The men have now either been killed or in fighting or whatever it may be. So imagine a culture that says, stay home, take care of your kids, and then randomly overnight you have to take care of everyone now. It's a very, very problematic and challenging perspective, but at the end of the day, they overcome and really successful 10 times over. I mean, without women on the ground, or without women advocating for Yemen outside even, a lot of the successes wouldn't happen, to be honest with you. And so when I talk about Yemen, I try to talk about the success stories because that's the positive note. Through that, with that being said, I'm not going to take most of the time because, we have other speakers. But, this is an organization here in the United States and also in Yemen. And we're trying also to educate people, advocacy, through what I'm doing here with you all today. And taking that 9-passenger plane, which is amazing. And really just going the longest way to talk about this country and talk about its beauty and talk about its unfortunate sufferings. But our overall concept here is not that humanitarian aid is short-term. It should be long-term through different ways, whether it's through education, whether it's through technological advances, whether it's through just trainings. And being here today with you all is one of the best privileges I have to discuss their stories. But remember that Yemen is not just a country that you see on Fox News or CNN for that matter about, the politics of things. But I think we have to educate ourselves also on the crisis itself. Because that's part of our duty, that's part of our being part of the solution. We have to understand why things are happening and not just think whatever you receive through media is what it is. There are great people on the ground who are sacrificing. There are also great people here like Dr. Nasser and Fatma and all these great Yemeni Americans who are doing their best as a responsibility to their nation, but also as a responsibility as a part of humanity. Humanity has no boundaries, has no borders, has no colors, has no skin. I mean, it's universal. So when people ask me, okay, and I always come to this, people are like, why should we really care about Yemen? I'm like, great question. How I can frame it is, it's a humanitarian principle to really be there for everyone. It's a religious, Abrahamic religion, whoever is of faith, but really humans come together by helping each other. Yemen is no different than Venezuela. Yemen is no different than China. No, it's not even different than America. We all have our differences, but at the same time we come together for the sake of humanity. So with that, definitely keep up with this great work on Yemen. We're so proud that actually Yemen is being discussed on this island. And I always tell them, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to this island. And they're talking about Yemen for the first time, and they're amazed. Yemenis actually, before I came here, they're so happy. They said, thank you so much for discussing Yemen, not only through the perspective of war, but through the perspective of showcasing the jewels of our country. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Well, my name is Fatima Alaki, and I am the first generation American Yemeni, born and raised in Waterbury, Connecticut. Yeah. I can't, you gotta say yay, because I think we only got one person from Connecticut. I gotta feel special for one moment. Yeah, so basically, I graduated from post-university with a degree in psychology, and I worked for the Department of Children and Families and Developmental Services. What I used to do was, foster care, doing supervised visits with autistic clients as well. And for some reason, like during my junior year, fall semester, what really changed my image of like my view towards from psychology to fitness was living with MS. I was diagnosed 8 years ago in February. It's been 8 years living with MS. So how many people in here know what MS is? Multiple sclerosis, show of hands. Okay. Huh? Oh, I was gonna explain it right now. So multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease that attacks the central nervous system. Basically, signals from the brain to the body. It's kind of like a silent illness. No one knows, people who are going through the symptoms. No one, for example, me, if I look, I have double vision. So if I look to the right, I see the audience like double, side to side. So I'm just gonna stay like this and feel special, seeing double the audience. And if I look to the left, I'll see double as well, but up and down. Yeah, so it's kind of like 4 eyes here, 4 eyes, like that. I know, but I've been living with it for 8 years and I've gotten so used to it. And that's why it took me to fitness. So I know that my doctor would tell me, my neurologist, he says, take care of yourself. With MS, don't let it control you. You control the MS. And that's how it goes. And when I went to fitness school, I decided to study more into it. I specialize in seniors, women's, children, group exercise, and nutrition. So I wanted to stay in that field to take care of myself and be in an environment to help those who are going through that as well. And I have clients, for example, I work in Greenwich, Connecticut, so all of my clients are very known people there. I have a judge, a criminal court judge, who did the Sandy Hook Elementary School case. Yeah, he's my client. So anytime he comes in and complains about, I go hard, because the majority of my clients are 80%, I think, are men that are bigger than me. And they'll underestimate me as this Yemeni hijabi girl, with a trainer written on her shirt. So anytime when people come into the gym, they'll see me as a trainer, not knowing. My shirt I would cross my arms, and I love when people underestimate me. That's the #1 thing. I love when people come in, when I first started working at the gym, people started walking in, they see me at the front desk. Like, okay, who are you? And I'm like, hi, my name is Fatima. They're like, oh, are you a new worker here? Do you do membership services? I'm like, no, trainer. So they're like, oh, okay, this is okay. We're excited for this. So then my client, who's the judge, he'll complain. He'll complain about the workouts that I would give him. He says, oh, this is too much. Why are you making me suffer like this? I know all of the people that I prosecuted wish to see me like this right now. And I'm like, stop complaining. You're in my courthouse. So you listen to what I say. So he did. So other than that, I would deal with, I did an evaluation with Stuart Weitzman, who does purses and shoes, who's a fan of all of those. As well as for the NFL network, I have someone who works for NFL. I train him as well. Aside from that, back to Yemen. With Summer, I remember helping, with Yemen Aid. And it was very important to me because I honestly, with the media, it doesn't show too much about what's going on in Yemen. And that's what breaks my heart. So I decided to do a campaign for Yemen Aid. And our goal was to do $10,000 by the end of the year. This was 2018. So I started the campaign on October 17th, 2018. October 15th, I'm sorry. Then I said, you know what, let's hopefully reach $10,000 by December 31st. Slowly, for some reason, I don't know how, it was just by the grace of God, I was just like, you know what, I started it. Then all of a sudden, from 10,000, we hit 10,000 3 days. 3 days. We hit $10,000. And then more just started coming, more money, more money, more money. In 28 days, please give me a guess how much you think I've raised in 28 days. Take a wild guess. Give me a number. Oh, I wish it was 28? No, $500,000 in 28 days. And I didn't know, it was just like incredible because I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And to be honest, when I was seeing those pictures, it takes me back to what my father, may he rest in peace, he passed away 17 years ago. It'll be 18 this year. He used to tell me stories about himself as a child. Growing up as an orphan, his father died before he was born, and he grew up in a very poor neighborhood. And there would be, days without food. It would break, it'd break my heart. So when I would see those kids, I would see my father. And I would say, you know what, for him, I want to do this. And when I know that he would be proud of me if he was alive with me today. So I kind of get emotional when I think about it. Aside from that, within 90 days, we hit over $1 million. Yeah. Then I would get I ended up being on the Republican American front page for the work that I've done. Then I get a call from Senator Chris Murphy. Ended up being at the state capitol, talked about it. I was just so nervous that day because it was just like, she knows. I was just so nervous, I kept my head down the entire time. It was just like too much with cameras all over. But yeah, aside from that, it was just an honor to help Yemen, and I hope we can bring more awareness to the people of Yemen. Aside from that, I wanted to keep it short, but thank you guys.
To all of our guests and the guests that have come along as well. And if you would like to continue the conversation with our guests, just come straight across the street to the Athenaeum. We're going to have a small reception up there, and you're welcome to join us there. And I would just also like to thank all of you for participating in One Book, One Island. And tomorrow is our finale. It's at the NHA from 3 to 5. A number of our guests are still going to be here, so they'll be there as well. And thank you all for being this year's One Book, One Island participants. Thank you.